Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you spent any time scrolling through Insta recently, actually what am I talking about for all you people, when you were scrolling through Insta recently, there is a good chance you have at some point seen this guy. Seriously, is it any surprise that this clip is blowing up? Nearly every element of it works together so well to make it so perfectly memeable. First of all, the dude looks like Merlin geeking out on mushrooms with this 1,000-yard stare he's got going on. Then you got the fan blowing his hair up, and the doom metal. I am seeing a real-life anime character here. This man exudes so much aura that I would not be surprised if I found out he was a real-life Nen user. In the world of memeable templates, this is a perfectly cooked steak dinner, and social media is eating good. I swear, every time I open up Instagram, I see at least like one new meme of this clip, and so many of my friends and contacts keep sending me new edits that they find. Because of this video, so many people now, myself included, have wanted to know who exactly is this band, and who exactly is this guy. When I first saw the clip, I figured that this was just another one of your typical local bands. You know, just a group of guys who see music as more of a fun side hobby and really just stick to bars and local shows. I've seen and even worked with my fair share of groups like that. There's a small setup and venue here, so that kind of gave me that vibe. So I see Pentagram on the kick drum, type it in, and when you know it, I see they got a Wikipedia page. I click on it, and let me tell you, my eyes bulge just as much as the guys did here, when literally the second line of the article is one of the pioneers of heavy metal, particularly of the subgenre doom metal. Okay, look, I have always thought of myself as a pretty knowledgeable metalhead. For the love of God, I co-host a podcast about this kind of music. I have to be knowledgeable. So I've more or less listened to most every rock and metal subgenre there is. Classic rock, grunge, post-grunge, alt-rock, metalcore, post-hardcore, nu metal, thrash, prog, those are all my usuals. But if I'm being real, I've never really gotten too into doom as much. Really, the only doom metal band I could say I know and especially love is Black Sabbath. Beyond that, I know some songs from Electric Wizard and Sleep, and that's about it. I don't know, a lot of it just sounds too slow and repetitive for my taste. It's just not a genre I'm particularly passionate about, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. Still though, pioneers of heavy metal. Like the whole genre. With that reputation, I would have thought that I'd at least be aware of them, even if I didn't particularly listen to them. So now I'm like, I have to go deeper. And man, let me tell you, as I was going from knuckle to shoulder deep, the more and more dumbfounded I was as I was reading what this band has been through. So today, we are going to be learning exactly who our wizard friend here is, as we dive deep into the tale of Pentagram. Our story begins in the early 1970s. This is like when heavy metal truly was born. You got hard rock groups like Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple already making it big at this point. And then of course you got Sabbath coming into the scene with their darker sound along with all the other stoner rock bands, amongst them being Pentagram. However, even at the very beginning, the band that would become Pentagram faced setbacks as throughout much of their existence, they've struggled to not only maintain a stable lineup, but also deciding on a damn name. I am not exaggerating. Across all the sources I've been using, lineups and names have been like all over the place. So many people have come and gone that my brain genuinely cannot keep track of it all. Even the amount of different names the band went through is ridiculous. Just to list some of the names they've gone by, we got Demon, Macabre, Stone Bunny, Virgin Death, The Douchebags, and Space Meat. Nearly all these names suck, but you know what? I'm not going to give them too much shit for it because you have no idea how hard it can be to think of a good name until you genuinely try. Not a single band or group I have ever played with has had a name that I or everyone else was confident in. That honestly even goes for online handles. Before Buckshot, I've had handles that I thought were really epic and clever at the time, but then I'd look back and realize, yeah, you know what, those were lame. Now really my criteria for what a good name is whether or not I cringe at all when I say the name out loud. Thankfully the name Pentagram stuck, because in my opinion that's a damn good name for a metal band. And despite all these changes going on, there has always been one key player in all of it. Yes people, the very man himself right here, Bobby Liebling. Born in Brooklyn 1953, alright let's go, another New York native, Bobby Liebling is the only original member of Pentagram to stick it out for nearly its entirety. For pretty much the entirety of the 70s, Pentagram had only been able to record and release a handful of songs and demos. Despite their very underground presence, they were presented with multiple opportunities to go even further. One time in 1975, their manager was able to arrange for them to rehearse in front of the manager and producers for the Blue Oyster Cult. Things went well, the producers were impressed with Pentagram and decided to go forward with working with them on demos to present to labels. Unfortunately, conflicts with the producers and Liebling regarding creative differences caused great tension and ultimately left the band unsigned.
I felt like killing Bobby.
Record deal, national tour, fame and fortune, it would have happened.
Around the same time, the band would have another chance at stardom when they were able to convince Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons of Kiss to come and watch one of their rehearsal sessions at the guitarist's house. But wouldn't you know it, things would actually go worse for them. On the day that Kiss showed up, both the bassist and guitarist were working their day jobs as janitors. They couldn't get out of work early and had to hitchhike their way to practice, and were in such a rush that they showed up still in their uniforms. So just to paint a picture, two of the biggest rock stars ever are watching this group of nobodies play in some dingy basement. Two of them are all sweaty, wearing these grubby covered coveralls, and just to put a cherry on top of this Sunday, in the middle of the performance, the landlord comes downstairs just to yell at them to shut the up. Long story short, Gene and Paul weren't exactly impressed.
Some of the things they said are, well, your name's Pentagram, there's only 4 of you. The singer and the bass player have bad skin. The drummer's too fat.
However, despite all of that, Liebling claims that afterwards the two had offered to pay him $20,000 for the credit to 2 of Pentagram's songs. Despite the enticing offer, Liebling turned it down. There's some grain of salt to that story, but if that's true, that's awesome. There has got to be some weird honor in Gene Simmons trying to take credit for your song, right? That tongue-flicking asshole is so obsessed with making a profit, he would never invest in something he wasn't absolutely sure would sell. Despite having members switching out as frequently as Lily Phillips' partners, Bobby has soldiered on keeping the band alive. I am not exaggerating when I say Pentagram has been Bobby's sole passion in life. As far as my research goes, Bobby has never worked a regular job, dedicating all his effort to writing and performing. He even has full rights to the name, and at one point in 1975, he got arrested, and while he was in jail, the rest of the band legally could not perform under the name without him, or at least without his approval. Bobby would honestly just take the Pentagram name and material he worked on and bring them to just every new group he joined up with. This would continue on into the 80s when Bobby's latest band, Death Row, had readopted the name Pentagram in 1984, and finally, in 1985, nearly 15 years after their initial inception, Pentagram would finally release their debut studio album. The band would keep the momentum going, releasing a second album, Day of Reckoning, in 1987 before disbanding the following year due to financial issues. Then they would reform again in 89, but then soon after break up again. Jesus Christ. Alright. Now we get to the 90s. In 1993, the Pentagram lineup from the Death Row period got back together and put out the band's third album, Be Forewarned. It was also during the 90s when Pentagram started releasing compilations of the material from the 70s, pretty much like the Misfits. Honestly, a lot of the story has read to me like the Misfits, a band that pretty much stayed underground during their entire run, never really got any mainstream recognition, but still maintained a devoted cult following that surprisingly included people who would go on to become big themselves. And then when those more high-profile stars cited them as an influence, that's what finally gave them more mainstream attention. And all their songs and demos suddenly become something sought after by new fans. 1999 saw the release of their fourth album, Review Your Choices, followed by Subbasement 2 years later in 2001. Interesting fact, Bobby considers this album his favorite of all time, but he also said he can only listen to the album every couple of months because it is just that depressing. Sounds like me with Radiohead. One time I was going through a rough period at college, and one night I went to Walmart by myself to pick up some stuff. I put my music on shuffle, and while I was shopping, lo and behold, what song comes on but Fake Plastic Trees? And when I instinctively started thinking of the music video for that song, and then remembered that I was alone in f***ing Walmart, I could not have felt more. Some music is dangerous when you are depressed. We get even more lineup changes during all this time, with the only consistent members being Bobby and frequent on-and-off drummer Joe Hasselvander. And another fun fact, one of the bassists that they had around this time was named Walter White. My god, can you just imagine these two being on stage together? There's your answer why Liebling looks like he's experiencing 100 Vietnam flashbacks simultaneously. He's been sampling too much of the product. I joke about that, but to get serious, one of Bobby's biggest struggles in life has been a long-time addiction to drugs. In a 2010 interview, Liebling went into full detail about how he struggled with drug abuse for over 30 years, specifically crack and heroin. These issues would actually be one of the main reasons why personnel changed so frequently. The physical and mental toll that it had on him, combined with the occasional stint in jail, would sometimes completely halt band activity, and other times would drive his bandmates away because they were just kind of done with his antics. It was also in this interview that I found out that there was actually a full feature documentary made about him called Last Days Here, released in 2011. And let me tell you, it is sad. During the time of production, Liebling was still addicted to drugs and living in his parents' basement, despite at that point being in his 50s. And the documentary follows him as he tries to clean up his act and take more initiative with his life and music. At the time of the interview, he had been sober for 3 years and attributed his sobriety to much of the positive changes he had seen in his life since, such as meeting his wife, becoming a father, and seeing Pentagram play more big-name shows. Okay, wow, that's the wife? You show me this, no context, I would have thought that this was his daughter. Okay, not gonna lie, this made me do a double take. But you know what, despite my own opinions, from what I gathered, they were still at least both legal adults when they met, and as far as I am aware, they are still happily together. So you know what, I'm still gonna say good for him. He was in a very difficult spot and he got out. That at the very least is commendable. Going into the 2010s, Pentagram would see an even greater deal of success more than ever before. Labeling was clean, Last Days Here won Best Music Documentary at the International Documentary Film Festival, and the band had been playing bigger venues both nationally and internationally. Again, good for him. I'm glad after everything things are. Bobby Liebling was arrested and pled guilty to abuse and neglect of a vulnerable adult custodian, presumably his mother. Okay. God, that sucks to learn about. I was feeling so happy for him after researching everything else because he's truly dedicated his life to this band. But then when I read that he did something like that, I can't help but lose some sympathy. And look, I was well aware that he was arrested before, but this is supposed to be after he got better, so it just makes it all the more tragic. It's just especially heartbreaking because I watched the documentary before I learned about this, and they interviewed his mom, and my impression of her was that, like, while she didn't always know how to best help her son, it was clear that, like, she still believed in him and still tried to, like, help in any way she could to keep his dream going. Unlike past experiences where Bobby's incarceration would just halt band activity, that wasn't the case this time. The rest of the band decided to continue on performing without him, with on-and-on guitarist Victor Griffin taking on vocals, but they gave the role back to Liebling when he rejoined following his release in 2019. As far as I'm aware, there have been no known issues with his behavior since his release, so I'd like to think he truly has made the right steps in working through these issues and making amends for his actions. Knock on wood here, but I don't think we're gonna have a repeat of me posting a video about somebody, and then literally like a week later, more news comes out about how much of a psycho they are. God, I was so f***ing pissed about that, you have no idea. In January of 2025, with yet another new lineup, Pentagram released their 9th studio album, Lightning in a Bottle, and here we are now, 1 month later. This whole situation has to be so surreal for Bobby right now. Let's not kid ourselves. Social media has made some bands' careers. Even if a band has been around for like a while, like a couple of years, all it takes is like that one song to start trending online or be used as a soundbite for memes, and then suddenly that band has experienced attention and popularity like never before. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. There are some of my favorite bands right now that I'm gonna tell you I probably would not have known if it wasn't for social media. It's gotten to the point where a lot of musicians now make songs with the sole intent of wanting to become a meme, but they try way too hard and just comes off as annoying.
Did I just write the next emo anthem? We are the princes and princesses of the glory days.
But with Pentagram, it wasn't a song that blew up, it was just Bobby's enthralling stage presence. Bobby is not a perfect person. I can't just brush off some of the more darker parts of his life, but I still want to believe he has overcome his demons. And I think the biggest reason why I could still wish him the best is because despite everything, the things that stayed the same was the desire to be a better person, and also to reach out to people through performing. I think the guy himself said it best. I consider myself before a recording artist, before a producer, before a writer, or any of that, and way before a singer for sure, I'm an entertainer. When I go to see a rock band, I don't go to hear a rock band. I go to see the rock band. If I wanted to just hear it, I can buy the records. That's why when I get up on stage, I'm gonna give the people entertainment. They came here to see a show, so give them a show. Well, Godspeed to you, Bobby Liebling. If anything else, you have one more fan. I listened to some of Pentagram's music, and I'm not gonna lie, I really enjoyed what I was listening to. Granted, I've only really listened to the songs from the 70s collections. A lot of those songs were reworked and re-released on studio albums, but personally I like the originals more. Forever My Queen has some awesome riffs, and within the fandom that seems to be the fan favorite. I also really enjoyed Last Days Here and 20 Bucks Spin, but I think if I were to say what my favorite Pentagram song is right now, I think I would go with Star Lady, which coincidentally was one of the songs Gene Simmons supposedly wanted to buy. So hey, if it's good enough for one of the most famous rock stars of all time, it'll probably be good enough for you. I could see why so many other people have enjoyed it over the years, and that documentary I mentioned, Last Days Here, was really good, but is it depressing at times. You're watching an actual crack addict at the end of his rope trying one last time to clean up his act before the rest of his support system gives up on him. It does a great job covering Liebling and Pentagram's story though, so I would still highly recommend it. It's interesting genuinely how weird the world works sometimes. Just from this very short 10-second clip where he's not even singing, so many people are now highly interested in this guy, and hopefully this does open the door on some new opportunities for him and Pentagram. With that though, I think we have come to the end of today's video. As always, I want to thank you for sticking it out to the end, and if you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. If you've really been enjoying my content and want to support me in an even more personal way, I'll have a link to my Patreon in the description below. We've hit 100 subscribers since my last upload, and I just want to quickly say that I am so thankful for every single one of you. Knowing that there are people out there watching and enjoying my content is so heartwarming. On a final note, if you enjoy rock subjects like today's video, I do also ask that you check out our weekly podcast, The Podcast That Rocked, where we talk about trending stories and upcoming announcements in the rock and metal music space. I think that covers everything, so until the next time, take care.